Hi, and welcome to another episode of Third Act Solutions. We've been talking about gratitude and reciprocity, giving back. And I wanted to share an example of my giving back to the U.S. military. As you know, I was a veteran. I was a medic in Vietnam, and I was asked to speak at a Mr. and Mrs. Military. And I want to share with you parts of my speech. I was a young man filled with hope and idealism when I was drafted into the war that would forever change my life. The jungles of Vietnam were a far cry from the streets of Oakland. The sights and sounds, the smells, they haunt me to this day. As a combat medic, I saw things no one should ever see. I lost friends, good men who deserved a better fate. I was medevaced out of Vietnam in December of '68, for which I received a Purple Heart. And when I returned home, I was not met with gratitude, but with indifference, and at the time, outright hostility. The country was divided, and we veterans were caught in a crossfire. In the spring of 1969, I got out of the Army 3 months early because I chose to go back to college, and I never looked back. I rarely, if ever, talked about my experience in Vietnam because it would only spur negative reactions. Were my efforts wasted? Did my friends die in vain? Did my buddy Frankie, who was a hell of a guitar player and aspired to be the next Kenny Burrell, who had his arm blown off and his dreams blown away with it, was that for no reason? The situation and hundreds of other equally traumatic situations that I encountered as a combat medic were questions that were important to me. Yet from the ashes of war, a strange kind of resilience grew. I learned to adapt, to persevere, to find meaning in the chaos. Once I got back into college, I discovered very quickly that my purpose on this planet and my passion was to be in the performing arts. Thank God for singing, acting, and dancing. I found a place where my pain could be a source of someone else's pleasure, education, understanding, and revelation. January 1984, I'm staying at the Watergate Hotel in Washington, D.C., and I'm doing a play called The Hasty Heart, produced by Burt Reynolds, starring Robert Urich and his wife Heather Menzies and myself at the Kennedy Center in Washington, D.C. One day, Bob and Heather and I decided to go for a jog. We jogged all the way over to the Washington Mall where the monuments were. We jogged past the Lincoln Memorial, the Jefferson Memorial, went up to the Washington Memorial, and then back to the Vietnam Memorial. We stopped and started to peruse the Great Wall of Names. They were looking for people that they knew, and I was doing the same thing, and I ran across Lopez's name, a kid in my unit. He left my unit to join the LRPs, the Long Range Reconnaissance Patrol. Those were soldiers who traveled in units of 4 to go on missions to find and track down the Viet Cong. They were basically on their own. I felt an immediate rush of emotion. Something inside of me felt like it was about to explode. Bob and Heather noticed that I was going through something and asked me if I was all right. I couldn't talk. It felt like the world was closing in around me and I was losing control. I turned and started jogging back towards the hotel, which was miles away. The jog rapidly turned into a sprint. I had the feeling that I was being chased by something for which I could not describe. It was almost like being in a monster movie and the monsters chasing me. I was completely unaware of what was going on in my body. I found myself sprinting as fast as I could, the entire distance from the Vietnam Memorial to the Watergate Hotel. I believe I was experiencing some form of repressed post-traumatic stress. Lopez's name re-stimulated in me something that I had buried away for 15 years. I went back to my hotel, closed all the curtains, and got into bed. all those images of Vietnam came rushing back to me. I pulled the covers over my head, trying to block everything out. I didn't stay very long because it re-stimulated the smell of death. One image after another started flying into my mind. I saw myself picking up the parts of Frankie's hand that was laying on the road. I saw the images that I had collected and stored somewhere in the crevices and caves of my mind. I saw it all. The door to which that locked away images burst open and came screaming to the forefront of my consciousness. Heather and Bob called me to see if I was doing okay. They were nice people. That was an extraordinarily tough day. But like my ancestors who had learned that you have to turn manure into fertilizer, a fowl's ear into a silk purse, chicken shit into chicken salad, I realized that I was standing on great, almighty shoulders. Like my great-grandfather who bought himself out of enslavement and then went back and bought his brothers and sisters out of enslavement, and then went on to become a major landowner and superior farmer businessman while raising 23 children. I was fortunate enough to have embodied the lessons that I learned from my grandfather as I followed him around as he plowed the fields and harvested the crop. The lessons about resilience, about finding my purpose, which is my North Star, and staying connected to that. About having ethics and integrity, about following my first impression with good-humored inflexibility, even when the whole cry of voices is on the other side. I think the most important lesson is that I cannot always control what happens to me, but I certainly can control whether I'm processing all of that through scarcity or processing it through abundance. I can then pivot and make different choices, better choices. And once I have clarity of direction, I can proceed with confidence and certainty. Being an artist allowed me the ability to borrow all of that trauma, lend it to the characters I play, the stories I tell, the scripts I write, the materials I direct, the projects I produce, the art that I create, and especially the young people that I mentor. So I leave you with this. Remember, process, pivot, and proceed. God will take care of the rest.